It's been 83 days since Raith Rovers fans flooded onto the pitch after Louis Vaughan's penalty was sunk into the net against Partick in the playoff semi-finals, and so much has changed since then. Welcome back to the Oh No 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 podcast, where nearly 3 months later on, the Rovers roller coaster has continued not to show any signs of slowing down, and it's not for the faint of heart. I'm your host tonight, Robbie Weir, and on the Oh No 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 podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by a motley crew of fellow Rovers fans. Firstly, we've got Iain Latto. How you doing, Iain?
Very well. It's been another whirlwind week in the world of Raith Rovers, but the football waits for no one, so we must go on.
Yep. Blair Hopcroft. How you doing, Blair?
Very well, mate. Very well.
And we had the first week of our Pre-dick-tion league. How did that go?
It was really good. So we had 93 participants, and yeah, pretty good. So the obviously by the time you hear this, you'll hopefully have seen that the predictions are up for this week. A wee bit of a shorter turnaround because we're doing the Friday night game, which I think will be probably pretty regular, to be fair. But yeah, the link's up, spread it far and wide, and yeah, don't worry about having missed out last week if you did, because there was plenty of folk got nothing.
Yeah, and an email did go out to those that I think were taking part as well. So
yeah,
you should have seen that today if you took place. Duncan Cameron, how you doing, Duncan?
I'm doing very well, mate. Thank you. Just looking forward to see if we can get the roller coaster back to being a bit more like the Pepsi Max and a little bit less like flat roller cola.
Well, that's one way of putting it. And then last but not least, Callum Blythe. How you doing, Callum?
Doing fine, although I don't. Unlike the last Partick game, I don't think I'll be on the pitch at full time.
Yeah, it's safe to say. I think that's pretty much a guarantee. Firstly, just want to say thanks to everyone for listening for the last episode that we had, because that was our most ever listened to episode. Naturally, an episode like that's going to have a bit more gravity to it with it being a sort of reaction. But yeah, the search for a manager goes on. There's not really been many updates this week. Slight update from John Potter, but I think the main thing to come out of Starks Park was we asked for it and we got it last Sunday. Andrew Barrowman sat down with Davy Hancock for a 20-minute interview where they spoke about the decision to change manager, sack Ian Murray, and what the future was going to hold. So I'm just going to start with yourself, Ian. What were your thoughts about the interview as a whole?
Yeah, I think he was definitely right to come out and, give the fans a bit more meat on the bones, I think was the kind of the way he put it. It was the right thing to do. How much information he actually gave us within the interview, it possibly wasn't a huge amount. That being said, I'm not really sure what people were expecting him to come out and say. He was never going to come out and say, give us the ins and outs of the reason as to why he's been sacked. He answered the question of whether or not there had been a fallout. I've seen a lot of people saying, I'm not believing that, and that's up to each individual person. I don't understand why Andrew Barrowman would lie about that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's also said that when Ian Murray is asked about it, he'll corroborate that story. So I think we've got to take him at face value and believe his word that it has been a footballing decision. I mentioned, I think in the first bit of the last podcast, that I thought it was a bit knee-jerk. And then Andrew Barrowman's interview, the first thing he said was that wasn't knee-jerk. So, Andrew, I'm sorry.
I've got to apologise as well, because I was like, all points to a flare-up at some point. And it's like, there wasn't a flare-up, and I'm like, oh, cheers, Andrew. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I don't know if he answered Duncan's 16-part novelisation of a question, though.
Would have been there all night, I think. But, yeah, it came out kind of... he's addressed some points, missed out a few. I think he's done what he had to do.
Yeah, I mean, with an interview like that, I know that a lot of the reaction from the outside is, how could you do this? Within the Rover support, I think there was a bit more of a split. I would say there was a wee bit more of a schism in terms of people saying like, nah, that's fair enough, I can understand that, and some people that were a bit like, oh, that's shocking, how can you do that? But I think at the end of the day, you've got to remember, people will probably look at Andrew Barrowman and they'll remember the footballer, but there is also the business side of it as well. And that, as I said, there's sort of these things that they've looked at over the longer term. Duncan, just for you, was it quite surprised to hear how candid it was from Andrew Barrowman and sort of the discussion, and what were you making of it?
No, I wasn't surprised by the sort of the candour that was there. I think because it's what we've come to expect. I think that, to be fair, when we were saying last time that we thought what was required was an interview, that felt like something that probably was already in the works. It felt realistic, whereas I think a lot of the time in the past would have said stuff like that knowing there wasn't any chance in hell of actually getting it. But I do also think that this particular sacking did need it. It genuinely did. Like, a lot of the time, the manager gets sacked and there's absolutely no question. There wouldn't be any point coming out and doing an interview. It's like, well, he's just lost 12 games on the bounce. Why do you think we sacked him? This genuinely required context and explanation, and I thought it was credible, I suppose is maybe the best word for it. Like, I wasn't taken aback at any point. I wasn't shocked by any of it, but it felt true as much as anything else. It was like, yeah, that does all seem to add together. You know, again, whether you agree with it or not, it adds up in terms of the taking the time. You know, it's been in the works for a while. All this kind of stuff tallies with what we understand of how this board does its business. And yeah, I mean, so we were talking about it during the week. And I think where I've sort of arrived on this is that there's kind of two questions that you have to sort of consider with something like this. And it's, the first one is on a more general level, did Iain Murray deserve to be sacked? And I don't think he did, to be quite honest. I don't think he deserved that. But if you're the chief executive of the football club, you've got a second question, which is, could somebody else be doing a better job right now? And if you convince yourself that the answer to the second question is yes, or if the answer to the second question is probably, that negates the first question. Because your job is to run the football club. So that's kind of where I've arrived with it, where if you think about it in terms of, oh, does he deserve this and all that kind of stuff, I think you arrive at a different answer. But fundamentally, if you're a cutthroat guy who's running a football club, I can see why they got to the decision that they did.
Yeah, 100%. And I know with a lot of these situations where, especially with management decisions, a lot of them can be reactive. But I think this one came across as both. I know that you talk about proactive and reactive decisions. I think this had elements of both almost. Because certainly, Blair, I know that you spoke a lot in the last podcast you were going through. And by the end of it, you pretty much convinced me. Like, initially, I'd been like, shocking decision. What are they doing? What's happened with this? And then you were like, well, to be honest, was he really the guy to take us forward? So what did you make of it, Blair? Just the interview in general and just sort of what came out?
I'd echo kind of what's been said. I think kudos has to go to Barrowman and the board at Wide for doing the interview, because as much as Duncan's saying it needed to be done, doesn't mean anything in football, does it really? Like, there's plenty of stuff needs to be done, but doesn't get done. The board have basically said they'll do this kind of thing, and they're doing it. So again, you've kind of got to give them credit where it's due, and you've got to take them at face value until you have reason to go otherwise. And I think everybody falls on one side or the other, that it's either really, really harsh or really, really bold. I'm kind of landing on bold. So one of the points that got, and I'm in true podcast fashion, I'm going to regurgitate someone else's opinion and pass it off as my own, but apologies, because I genuinely can't remember where I saw it or where I read it or heard it or whatever it was. But there was somebody was talking about the Hamilton game this season in the League Cup, and how basically we went into that game needing to win, and needing to win by 3 goals. That was the kind of caveat. That's where we needed to be. Anything short of that wasn't going to get you through. Did that look like a team that went out to win by 3 goals? It really didn't. Like, and the more I kind of get these little bits pointed out, like I say, my mate that had mentioned the difference between the Partick game last season and the Airdrie game this season, the first game of the season, and creating chances and knocking at the door and all these kind of things, the more I think, like, and I've said already, I do not subscribe to this lucky results or anything. It's nonsense, right? We deserved every result we got, but did the results ultimately paper over a few cracks to an extent? It probably did, and that's probably the case for most football teams most of the time. But I think the cracks have just got that little bit wider, and like we could have went into that Hamilton game, went swashbuckling and got beat 2-0, and we'd be in exactly the same position we're in just now. Like, we had nothing to lose going into that game. And I suppose that's maybe what Barrowman, and he put it way better than I did. Let's relight the fire. Much better than there's what did I say? Pizzazz. Pizzazz. Man, can't believe I used that word in public. But do you know what? It's that thing of they could have went at that game differently. If he'd went at that game and went all at it, chucked everything forward, proper full-on Murray ball, and lost the game, you could at least go, he had a go. Like, do you know what I mean? He had nothing to lose. But actually, we kind of treated it like a pre-season friendly, and we kind of get through. We're not going to get through. So let's just keep our powder dry for next week. And maybe that's not good enough.
Yeah. It's a few responses I saw online sort of going towards that direction. One person I saw on Twitter was asking the question, like, realistically, can you actually say with any of the games from like the League Cup or the league, like since we started, were we ever really like looking anything that was impressive? And I think the honest answer to that is, I mean, obviously you have factors that are going to play a degree in that, but yeah, I think that people, on the whole, the reactions, I've not seen the majority of games, but I would say that, like, based on what I have seen, I think it's an understandable question that people are asking. Callum, just to go back to sort of the reaction from the outside, because you're obviously quite engaging in terms of your sort of social media stuff, and you've got a bit across the board. Were you quite surprised in terms of sort of the difference between the reaction from other fan bases compared to the reaction from our own? And that maybe Rovers fans were a bit more understanding of it compared to the outside?
Yeah, I get what you're on about, because when it first got announced, I think there was a unified reaction throughout all of Scottish football. It was like, what? It's been one league game. What are you playing at? But then obviously it was as time came to pass, even by when we started doing the recording, it was you sort of had other Rovers fans pointing out these little things like the form since January, how we've played since January, that whole sort of thing, and of course the whole podcast recording. We got Barrowman's interview, all that sort of thing that obviously we are much more likely to consume. So all that sort of stuff has reassured people. It was just like, might not like it, but fair enough. The board have got this under control. They know what they're doing. It's not knee jerk or all that sort of thing. There was a point that Barrowman made where it's like the one that was being thrown around was it's only been one game. Where he was saying, no, it's not been one game. It's been 5 competitive games plus the 3 pre-season friendlies, so 8 games. And that's a really good point to make. So there are still people from on the outside who are like, this is a shocking decision, but I think most of us are at peace with it, you know?
Yeah. I think as a fan base, it goes back to and this is very much a throwback to the last few years within Scottish football. The old Pedro Caixinha quote, what is it? The dogs bark and the caravan continues moving along. It's kind of one of these things where it's like happened, people are really upset, but it's just one part of a larger journey, particularly under this board. And again, as a fan base, we've obviously, I know that Blair, you put out a tweet, and we had on the podcast Twitter as well, sort of like really just extending thanks to Iain Murray for sort of the time that he was manager, because that was something that I think that we were all very keen to hammer home. But as well, it's still no one player or no one manager is bigger than a football club, and unfortunately they do have sort of shelf lives, so it'll be intriguing to see how things develop over the next few weeks. One thing, Iain, that came out for me from the interview was that I think Andrew Barrowman was very keen to sort of emphasise that, like, there have been plans in place for quite a while like with anything, he's basically saying. So at the club at the moment, he's basically said that we've had other positions in the summer. So I'm guessing the example of this is Blair going off to Blair Doughty going off to Falkirk to be head of performance. Basically says for every position it feels like they've got contingencies at the moment, or that's basically what it was relaying. So do you think that, just in terms of what did you make of that, and just the thoughts in terms of that we might already have something sort of in the framework in place, or the idea in place for moving forward?
Yeah, I thought it was quite intriguing. It's difficult to know exactly what he means without knowing who the person is. So I think they've obviously, well, that's what they're saying, that they've done a lot of due diligence and on who the next manager is going to be, and it's like, well, you know, without speaking to that manager, how do you know that they're going to be comfortable coming in and working in our structure? So yeah, it's quite difficult to read between the lines in terms of what he means and who he means. He was very, very set that they had someone in mind, and I listened to it again right before we came on because a lot's happened since Monday, and I was kind of wanting to refresh it, and it didn't sound like there was, like, it sounded like one or two people, the way he's kind of talking. So the rumour mill's been absolutely churning non-stop since the news, pretty much. I've heard people are definitely coming, people are definitely not coming within about 10 minutes of one another today. So yeah, I mean, it's going to, I'm really not sure who it's going to be, but I'm glad it's not me that's making the decision because they seem pretty set.
Yeah, and we were talking about that earlier on. I feel like a lot of the time in the past, Rovers were quite renowned for information late. I mean, there was a period where it was an absolute joke. You had like team lines getting posted into forums and stuff like that days before games. Whereas now, you look at the signings of Burn and Easton when they both penned their contracts. Nobody had a clue. So I think this is very much going to be cards to the chest type. And I feel like any rumours that you hear at the moment are just going to be, I mean, we'll talk about them later on, but there's some absolutely wild ones out there, some very interesting ones out there, but we will come back to it. It was also mentioned that there had been a bit of discussion with the players, so naturally, just sort of with this game coming up against Partick, I think people had already built that straight away from the start before these two teams going for the league. So yeah, Duncan, just how difficult do you think it will be just going forward in terms of the discussions with the players and sort of moving forward? Do you think that will be a big impact for this week and sort of resetting and try to keep an eye on the ball that we have got such a big fixture coming up?
I think it's probably maybe two different points, really. For this week, I don't doubt it has an effect. And actually, I think the fact it's Partick Thistle and it's a big game is sort of unfortunate because I think naturally it would have to have an effect. It changes the entire thing. And I know that there's been a bit of chat about, you know, people are already in place and, you know, the coaching staff's still around and all this kind of stuff, and there's elements of continuity, but you can't possibly remove, you know, the kind of head of the football operation and not have an impact. And players naturally will have some sort of reaction to that. But overall, over the longer piece, getting beyond the initial kind of shock of it, I don't think it necessarily has to have any particularly kind of outsized negative reaction, really. Like, I don't think your average football player is that bothered, ultimately. I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but like, football's very transient by its nature. You know, you can't get too attached to your manager. We know Ian Murray was linked to two jobs last year, and he could have gone at any point. So I think there will be there must be an interesting reaction within that, because, you know, a lot of the time a manager gets sacked and typically the captain will come out a couple of days later and he'll do an interview and he'll be like, we feel terrible because we've let him down and ultimately he's carried the can for our performances. Well, I don't think that'll be the case with this. I think this will be more the case of it'll have taken the players by surprise, the same way it took Ian Murray by surprise and took us by surprise. And I think the nature of that, they'll be more kind of taken aback and more a little bit, almost a little bit like borderline, like offended or affronted a little bit, where it's like, oh, hang on, you're suddenly accusing us of being so bad that you've sacked the manager. But fundamentally, I think you get over that very quickly. And there was a point in Andrew Barrowman's interview that a couple of people I've seen picked up on Twitter and elsewhere, where he basically, and I'm going to paraphrase because I did not go back and watch it today, I'm afraid. He basically said we had a couple of meetings with the players. So we sat down with the players, then with a senior group, and then, I can say, I paraphrase this, but he basically said, they gave me their thoughts, and I'm not bothered. Like, fundamentally, it's like I'm not that bothered how they feel about it, because their job is to, get on with it. And actually, the people I saw were like, that's not a very kind of diplomatic way to speak and all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, it's correct. Yeah. Like, you're the chief executive of the football club. You make these decisions. Whether the players like it or not should not factor into your thinking. You can't have the tail wagging the dog. So I thought that was possibly the most candid bit of the whole interview. Or maybe the least kind of diplomatic bit. But I think he's bang on. Like, fundamentally, he has to go and tell the players, just speak to them, he'll explain his reasoning to them. And if some of them are unhappy about it, and I don't doubt they are, because any criticism of Ian Murray is also tacitly a criticism of them, but I think they'll get over it very quickly, because what other choice have you got?
Yeah, I think, it was an interesting listen. He was calling players simple beasts during the interview, which I thought was very interesting to hear. But just in general, Blair, what did you make in terms of that part of the interview, just in terms of talking about the players and sort of the reaction that you're expecting?
I thought he was frank, he was honest. Well, he appeared to be. From the outside looking in with absolutely no knowledge of what goes on inside those walls. I think I'd like to think the players have a bit of pride in their own performance and their own day jobs, and that as much as, I mean, we flippantly say these things like, it won't matter. Of course it'll matter a bit to them. And I think they acknowledged that. They said, and John Potter's talked about it in his interview, as short as it was, about, Monday was quiet. And Barrowman talked about that as well. Monday was quiet. Players got together and all the rest of it. But I think they've got a point to prove now. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be a new manager coming in. You want to be in the manager's plans, like, go out and perform. So you're looking for a reaction from them. If there was, and it's that thing as well. You kind of look at it and you think, what was wrong? What was it? Was it just Murray's tactics? Was there actually in my head, I keep coming back to the point Duncan made in the show the other day about Jose Mourinho and the kind of just running out of steam, almost that thing of just wearing out your own kind of thing. Whether a bit of that's maybe happened, whether boredom set in, whatever it is. But you've got to think.
Could you maybe argue Murray was maybe a victim of his own success? Coming so close in terms of the league, and then you start getting a mode of like, we'll just try and get over the line, and then...
Yeah, no, but again, a victim of your own success, because I said that as well, and the more I think about it, what do we mean by that? Because he wasn't a victim of his own success in terms of results, because the results were still okay. They're not great. Yeah. They weren't as good as they were in the first, but nobody's looking at that first half of the season and thinking, we need to hit 41 points again in the second half of the season. Nobody was thinking that. Do you know what I mean? And so is he a victim of his own success in terms of those performances we keep coming back to? I was thinking the other day as well about, do you remember Arbroath away? The game on the Wednesday night. It was the game where we won with the last gasp Lewis Vaughan goal. Right?
Yeah,
so we were awful, right? But we were doing all right. We were kind of winning the game, and then they scored that penalty, and the game kind of turned on that, and it was going and it was going, and it was getting later and it was getting later. And I genuinely remember turning to the boys I was there with and went, "Don't worry about it. There'll be another chance coming. There will be another chance." I can't actually remember the last time I felt like that.
Yeah.
So I wonder, Blair, if it's kind of... You're saying about like the kind of Mourinho thing where he worked his players too hard and they get bored of his shtick. I wonder if Murray's issue is not dealing with the expectation, like the weight of expectation, or what the opposition does to you. Because the first half of the season, we weren't a surprise package. Nobody was like, bloody hell, it's Raith Rovers. But at the same time, nobody thought we were going to go and take 41 points in the first half of the season.
Yeah.
And there was an element of being able to kind of, not in terms of goals, but like kind of blow teams away in that first half. The momentum and the belief in everything that was there. But then the second set of fixtures rolls around. You're playing everybody else again. You know what I mean, the third and fourth set of fixtures. And you're not a surprise package anymore. Everybody's seen it. Everybody knows. And actually everybody's going, this team's decent. So we're going to try and counter the weaknesses that we had last time. We're not going to let them do what they did to us. And so tactically you've got that to contend with. And then you've got the mentality aspect of it.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult going into games actually thinking we should win this.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's maybe the element of... That's where Murray's potentially been let down a little bit. Because actually the big games where we weren't necessarily expected to win or we thought it was going to be a battle, that was where we got our best results last year. Beat Dundee United twice, beat Dunfermline 5 times in a row. Like, the big games we were quite good. But then you think about the second time we went to Tannadice, there was quite a lot of expectation. Suddenly we were like, oh no, last time we went and we turned them over. Kind of against all odds. This time we went up, like, we're going to go toe to toe. We're all really confident. We're going to go and give them a game, and we fell to bits, and we never kicked a ball.
But we were never plucky though, and I think that's the thing. We were never this kind of unexpected underdog. Like there was a swagger that first half of the season. That's kind of the way I always looked at it. Like it was kind of, you can think what you want because we're not really bothered what you think. We're going to stick out a little poster. We're going to make a cartoon at the end of the game. We're going to call it a movement. We're all going to get behind it. There's this kind of like, the Rovers train is rolling into town. Get on board or get out. Like, it's up to you. And then, second half of the season, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it was just couldn't handle the expectation as opposed to the enjoyment of having the swagger.
It's kind of like a sort of siege mentality. And you can't do that. You can't be under siege when you're top of the league. Like, totally. If you'll allow me to mix those kind of metaphors together.
I think that there was 2 games that really jumped out for me when you're looking about that really ruptured that in a way. It was the 4-4 game against Ayr at Starks, and then the 2-2 game where Arbroath's Ali Adams fired one into the top corner. Just those games just seemed to completely rupture that, and after it just felt like the sort of to use the French, je ne sais quoi, can't describe the words. Like, there was something about it, and then it just changed. It was really bizarre when you look back. But Iain, what are your thoughts on it?
Just on what you were saying there, I think another one of those games and another one of those nights where that really got punctured was actually the 3-2 at Arbroath. That was a horror. That was
That's
an
exactly
absolute
what I was
horror.
just going to say. Exactly that.
Like, I think that was worse than the 4-4 or the 2-2. Like, notwithstanding a fucking goalkeeper scoring a rasper. Like, I think overall it was much worse. Duncan, you make a really good point. It's not something that I'd considered. Dealing with that level of expectation, it comes with its own problems, and possibly that's what we've seen.
Yeah, no, it's like there was multiple games where we just seemed to lose it. It's like we would go and all just like, as we said earlier, just like, we're Raith Rovers, we've got our comics, we're going to do what we want. But then after that Dundee United game, where it's like we were top of the table, I think it sort of shifted. It was like a mentality shift where instead of being all going out and playing football, maybe we just got too scared to lose games. So that's why we ended up not being as swashbuckling, as attacking, as Murray ball as it was in the first half, and that led to stuff like the 4-0 draw with Ayr, the 2-0 draw with Arbroath, 3-2 to Inverness, 3-2 to Arbroath again. It was just that sort of thing where it just sort of fell off, lost their identity, trying to change to keep up with Dundee United, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really a consensus about that there was that sort of season change, and that sort of just the feel about it did. But one of the key points, there was really to sort of end the interview, Andrew Barrowman, David gave him a bit of carte blanche to answer. Blair, he came on and he basically sort of said, what would be your one statement to the support? What you're given a free hit in terms of like what you can say to the supporters. And immediately he comes out and says, I just want to make it abundantly clear to the fans, people are going to make this out to be Raith Rovers have taken a big hit with this financially and that we're going to be paying off a 3-year deal. Not the case, and that there is still budget to spend. He made that abundantly clear. So what did you make in terms of that, setting up the expectation for fans sort of moving forward, that will, on top of bringing in the new manager, that we've still got the expectation that we've still got a bit of budget to play with, and going forward that will be obviously with these new signings progressing. I
mean, yeah, it genuinely wasn't a surprise at all for me personally. I've kind of gone on record and said that, and I really hope this doesn't come back to bite me in the long run, but I genuinely have a bit of faith in this board. I think that they've done everything they said they would do, and I think ultimately, I think I'm the kind of person, and I'd like to think I'm like this in my kind of everyday life anyway. I take it at face value until I have a reason not to. And I mean, we ran out of that with the boards in the past. Like, we've run out of that with managers in the past and everything else. And that's the nature of football. But they keep saying they're going to do things, and they keep doing it. I mean, we were on this podcast last year talking about, it's easy putting up numbers when you're breaking records, but do you keep putting up? They kept putting up numbers. They kept doing it all season. Do you know what I mean? They stuck to their word and they did what they said they were going to do. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because there was no bit of me at any point thought it was knee-jerk or that they'd not thought this through. Whether the plan was the right plan, whether the plan would be one that ultimately I would agree with, is all up for debate. But I never ever thought there wasn't a plan. I never thought that there was like one of the board members was sat at Airdrie on Saturday and thought, nah, right, that's it, I've had enough. Yeah. Phoned the rest of them and said, come on, we'll can them and we'll worry about it on Monday. It's just, I don't think it's in their nature. I think they're really business savvy, they're really well thought through, and this will have been detailed and planned out. And that includes that budget. They're looking at that team. They know that we still need one or two, definitely a striker, if not two strikers at this point, coming into the club. They know that. That if I genuinely think if it was a choice between a couple of more players that might get us over the line or a manager in the current squad, there's a little bit of me thinks they might have held out for a bit longer to see whether Murray could turn it around. Because I think the squad definitely needs a bit more. And I think that's got to be a priority for them. And I think it will be.
Yeah. I would, if I was to use one word to describe them, I would say, especially after that interview, when you hear about talking about sort of, we've got our unit, we've got our structure, we've had plans in place for a little while in terms of shortlists for who we potentially were looking for. Methodical would be the word I would use to describe it, because they just seem very on the ball in terms of where they want to go, and they've got a plan of what they're expected and where they want to head with it. So yeah, Duncan, just to sort of come on, Blair mentioned it earlier on, but there was always the comment about relighting the fire too. So just going forward, how important do you think that sort of message is to instill in the fans, that sort of like, look, this is, I can understand why people are sort of seeing it as a setback, but at the same time, we need to try and get back to where we're at. So, how important do you view that sort of message?
I think it is important. I think it's probably less important than it would have been with a lot of other sackings, because the fans didn't really have any time to turn on anybody. Fans were fine, really. They were a bit disgruntled at Airdrie, but nobody was ripping up seats or anything like that. It was a bit of a beating 1-0. That's a bit of a pain. But I think that put it this way: with the right appointment, the fans will be right on side almost immediately, and wholeheartedly. The whole thing is, we touched on it last time. Fundamentally, we're all Raith Rovers supporters. We're all supporters of the football club, and actually, the football club can do, within reason, a lot of stuff. And fundamentally, we're all kind of along for the ride anyway. So, from a pure kind of pop psychology point of view, it makes sense for all of us to get on board with sacking Iain Murray as quickly as possible, because otherwise,
you're so right.
Otherwise, you're just in this thing where you're kind of like, I'm really annoyed at the Rovers, and I don't really want to be. So actually, I said it last time. It's if there's somebody still wearing a Rovers tracksuit, you're much more inclined to be on their side. And it's like as soon as Iain Murray's gone, and to be fair, I did want to say actually. You mentioned it already, Robbie. We were nowhere near as kind of grateful as we should have been on that last podcast. Whoever was hosting that needs to have a look at themselves, because I think we dived straight into the rationale for the sacking and stuff a little bit too much. Robbie, to your credit, actually, you did get in a little bit of.
I also finished off the predictions as well for Airdrie by predicting a 1-0 loss. So I'm sorry, lads.
But I think it's two separate things. So fundamentally, I think we can all be very grateful to Iain Murray. Certainly I am. Last season was incredible in large part, and it was the best season we've had in a long, long time. But at the same time, that now is very firmly consigned to the past. And it's a case of, right, give us a new manager and we'll get behind them. And we'll...
sooner the better.
Light a fire and whatever else it takes. As long as it's not pizzazz.
That's fair.
But I think again, the people are there. This is again possibly this is credit to the board for acting so soon. There hasn't been a dwindle. There hasn't been a time for people to turn off and go away. The momentum from last season is effectively still there if you can just pick it up and get it going again. And fingers crossed, whoever the new manager is can do that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how things pan out on Saturday in particular, sort of because it is our first home game in the league. So you've got the season ticket factor and sort of what's going on and the difference between this season and last season. But yeah, fundamentally, I totally agree. I think that it's one of those ones where realistically, there's not really anything that we can be aggrieved about a board coming out and sort of saying look, it wasn't really working to our standards that we want to bring to this club. To sort of have, we weren't creating as many chances as we'd hoped. We weren't playing the football that we hoped. We weren't maybe getting the results that we hoped. We want to try something a bit different. And it is a bit brutal to say that because, again, we are grateful to Iain Murray and everything that he did for the club. But at the same time, maybe it's a change in the standards and the way that things are going. It is funny when you talk about looking at people with gripes about the club. And I noticed that that one on Pine Bovril, that was the person that was like, we still get an explanation about Ross Milne. And I'm like, it was fucking, 5 months ago? He's away in Morecambe, who cares? It's like...
I'm actually more worried about, because you're talking about how we weren't, and I think, Duncan, I'd echo completely what you said, we weren't quite grateful enough in that show. And it was certainly, I came away thinking, I never actually said how much I've enjoyed Iain Murray being the Rovers manager. I mean, that man literally owns the Fife Derby at this point. Until somebody else wrestles it from him, it's his. And he gave us some incredible, that Partick game. Do you know what I mean? There's so many memories attached to that guy, and I'm really, really grateful. But we did. I think what any kind of self-serving human does is you rationalise it. You try and make yourself feel better. You have to. I'm a bit worried that Scott's not here tonight because I think somebody needs to head over to the Netherlands and give him a cuddle, because I listened back to the show, and I'll be honest, I don't often listen back to the show when I'm on it because I can't stand that voice. But as much as that was hard to believe, I don't actually like the sound of my own voice. But I was listening back and Scott was raging.
He was exasperated when you're talking. Like,
oh, he was fizzing. And so Scott, if you're listening, I hope you're all right, pal.
I think what you're saying about, like, I started off on the same level as Scott, and then Blair, just as you're talking, I'm like, Blair's right. Let's get behind this. But it totally leads into what Duncan's saying, where it's like, fundamentally, you're a supporter of the football club. You're not an Ian Murray supporter. So when Ian Murray moves on, naturally, you want to find reasons to get back into supporting your football team. And I think that's what we did. I think we just totally rationalised it. Maybe too far for Scott, certainly, who wasn't very impressed. But I felt better after it. I felt better.
That's probably credit to the board, which we've said already, but there is, and I think it's the point Duncan made just a few minutes, there's so much to get behind.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was, because you have to go back 18 months to a time when it was really hard to get back into being a Rovers fan again, actually.
Sure.
And you really had to look for reasons to get back involved. And it actually wasn't that hard this time round. And I know it's a very, very different thing. I'm not trying to liken the two things at all. But do you know what I mean? It's not difficult right now to get behind the club and to get behind what's kind of going on, as aggrieved as you might be. And I think the phrase I used through the week is, I probably wouldn't have had the balls to pull the trigger. Yeah. But I can kind of understand the logic and the reasoning behind why it was done, as much as I probably wouldn't have done it myself.
See, for me, Andy Barrowman spoke about how footballers are simple beasts. Football fans are even more simpler beasts, and I mean that in the nicest way, right?
Yeah.
See, like, if we get this new manager in, and then we win a couple of games, and we shoot up the table, nobody's going to be moaning if we are creating chances and we're scoring goals. I mean, it could work the other way, but yeah, it's very, very straightforward. I mean, the perfect example for that of me, I slaughtered the appointment at the time. Still wasn't particularly happy when it was happening, but Gary Locke. I remember standing at Tannadice with my pal, with the shed full of Rovers fans.
We all did
chanting Gary Locke, and I'm sitting there like, did I get this wrong? And then when 3 months, I was like, no, I didn't get it wrong. It was very, very bad. But yeah, just
in that moment, it felt good though, right?
Yeah. I mean, Kevin McCarthy and Jordan Thompson scoring screamers. Again, two players that I probably slaughtered far more than my own good. But
I was going to say, I know we spoke about this pre-show a bit away. I was going to kind of mention this. So, having listened to the show today again, there was a point Ian raised, and I nodded and vehemently agreed with him at the time, is that a lot of what Ian Murray's being kind of sacked for was intangible. What was it you said? Intangible metrics.
Tangible metrics. Yeah, I don't know where the
things
fuck
that. Yeah, it was. I still can't get my head around it. But it basically things you can't measure, like the feeling about the place, the performances, the things that you can't necessarily put a number on. Well, a mate of mine sent me some data stuff. You know these. What's it called? Is it Boom Scout or something? The thing's called, isn't it?
Stats Bomb. I think you're looking for
Stats Bomb. See, that just shows you what I'm talking about. So
really looking forward to hearing the rest of this point.
I know, totally. But these scouting programs effectively that you get that measure everything. So he sent me 3, and I mean, I'm not going to bore everybody with the exact details of it, but basically there was shots from open play. There was something that effectively meant possession in the final third, and something that effectively meant passes into the final third, so like attacking moves, as it were. And he drew a line, and the vertical line was January. And I mean, literally, you could see on these graphs like a marked rise up to the blue line, and then this huge drop off after the blue line. And they're things that, as a football fan, obviously, we never have the numbers to kind of go with it. But we talk about those feelings. You come away going, we just didn't create anything today, like, but we're a bit flat or whatever. But I'm wondering, like, the board sitting with these, they must have access to this kind of stuff, like, and they'll be sitting with these numbers and looking at it and going, well, there's a feeling about the place. There is the kind of, the fans are starting to get a bit of gruntle here and a bit of gruntle there. But actually, you've got all this data available to you now, something that the club's clearly into. And it physically shows, like, a turn, pretty much from the point he signed the contract extension, that it just dipped. So yeah, that final point, not knee-jerk. I think it's hard to kind of swallow still a bit. But, yeah, kind of makes sense, actually.
You kind of want to hate your manager by the time they get sacked, don't you?
Yeah.
Really. Makes it easier if you've been shouting and bawling at them when you're desperate for them to go, and then it's quite cathartic when they actually do get sacked. Whereas this was just totally different. But there's never in the history of football been a manager who was sacked who shouldn't have been sacked earlier.
Yeah.
Every single manager who's lost his job, it would have been better for the football club if they'd sacked him a week before and got somebody in earlier. And you'll never know how bad it could have gotten. Equally, he could have recovered it. He could have been about to go on an 11-match winning run under Iain Murray. We'll never know that. But to go back to the point you were making a minute ago about the board and the decisions that they've made, really up till now, all the decisions that they've made that we've all been really praising and really happy with, they have been quite sort of like populist decisions, almost. They've been doing stuff that everybody's supposed to like and everybody should like. And that's fine and that's good, and I'm glad they're doing stuff that I like. That's nice. But
Donald buys.
Yeah, that's the first. That's number one. There's then a gap, and then there's everything else they've done. But it's all well and good just doing the stuff that you know people like. What separates, the wheat from the chaff in the boardrooms across the country is making the tough decisions that people don't necessarily like. Seeing ahead, making decisions as early as possible and as decisively as possible. And they're not perfect on that front. I think we're all in agreement that if you're going to sack him, it should have happened 8 weeks ago. Kind of, in hindsight, and it is in hindsight, giving Iain Murray the pre-season and the League Cup and then just one league game probably means he was close enough to the door that you should have actually just, if you were going to do it, pulled the trigger on the bus on the way back to Dingwall. But you've got to just say, like, they're making decisions. We've agreed with so many of them so far that they've bought enough credit to see how this one pans out. And we'll see. And fundamentally, like, they'll live and die by the performance of the next manager. If the next manager's terrible, we will be back on here calling for Iain Murray to come back. But that's the nature of the game. And that's fundamentally why there are people in these jobs running this football club.
Duncan, I went low-key viral in Greenwich this week for absolutely slaughtering Dougie Emery, which, to be honest, I still stand by. We've apparently got delusions of grandeur, that's the phrasing used, which Ian Latto's headshake sums that up quite nicely. What we'll do is we'll take a slight break here from our group therapy session that we've got ongoing. We're not yet sponsored by BetterHelp, but if they do want to get in touch with us, then that's absolutely fine. But yeah, we will be back after a short break.
This episode of the Oh No 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 podcast is sponsored by Dynamic Industrial Services, the rope access specialists. Every week we talk about the Rovers' latest attempts to climb the SPFL ladder, but sometimes even a ladder won't reach. DIS are specialists in working at height, offering maintenance, inspection, repair and more, right across Scotland. So if you need a rope access specialist and you want a premiership service, visit dynamicindustrialservices.co.uk to find out more.
Welcome back to the Oh No No podcast, where it's a look ahead now to a few different points. Firstly, we had a bit of news today, Callum. Kieran Bowie has made the move back up to Scotland. He's joined Hibs for a fee of reportedly about £600,000. Just to look at that move, so obviously Rovers had that sell-on fee that we sort of have been... I think most Rovers fans had kept a keen eye on for the last few years, given his development. He went off and on to loan move at Northampton, where he went on, did really well. Scotland under 21 caps as well for him. So, yeah, what did you make of the move? And just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's an excellent move. Excellent move for him. I do know that he had a contract extension clause in his contract at Fulham, and he was meant to be going to an upper League One side. That was the plan for his development. But obviously, Hibs have come in and actually signed a Scottish player for once. So it's really good, and also it's good for him because obviously it's like he's a good young talent. He's in the Scotland under-21s. So now he's playing in the Premiership, a team that's looking to get back towards European places, that sort of thing. Really good for him. Also really good for the club because obviously we had the sell-on, which will help towards paying off Ian Murray, but also going towards another striker. So it'll be good to see what can be done.
Yeah, Ian, just to come to you really quickly, actually, on that point, I sort of mentioned earlier on in the group chat, and just to get your thoughts on it, because Bowie was obviously one of the ones that came through the Fife Elite Youth Academy. We also had Dylan Tate as well, among a few others. Even Callum Hannah, for example, he was part of the Fife Elite at one stage before it got disbanded and Dunfermline picked up the reins. So you had Kieran Bowie's initial move to Fulham, which was a six-figure sum. Dylan Tate to Hibs, six-figure sum, and then the sell-on fee, six-figure sum. So it feels really like Rovers have been the real winners out of that setup, to say the least. So do you think it's a positive sort of inflection in terms of the legacy that the Fife Elite had?
Yeah, it was obviously really fruitful. We've managed to take a lot of money off Hibs as a result of it. Seems to be the main takeaway from it. I don't really know what has replaced that. I know we've got the Community Foundation and stuff. We've got the young lad Jake Nicholson that's come directly from that. You've got Callum Hannah that's come from that. So it remains to be seen what's going to replace it and whether or not what does replace it will be quite as fruitful. Yeah,
I think that the Community Foundation's quite... I think the interviews that I've seen from John Potter so far sort of said that I think academies are very hard to set up just due to the costs. That the Community Foundation might be an alternative avenue because there is younger players that can be out there. Guys that maybe are like Callum, that'll go off and they drop out a youth setup and then they go and play, maybe want to play with more experienced players rather than playing in a youth or reserve league, and then opt to go and play for a sort of maybe a setup that's further down the pyramid. So yeah, keen to see how it pans out moving forward.
The one thing I would say, just very quickly, because I'm aware that a lot of kind of obviously local people will be listening to this, and anybody linked to Glenotha Strollers will be currently doing their dinger, and the fact that we've not mentioned them.
Credit.
Because I've got to be honest, like, he was at Fife Elite for about 3 months. Like, he signed for the Fife Elite and then basically went straight into the Rovers team. So I think it's possibly a little bit disingenuous to say that it was
you could say
the fruits of the Fife Elite
well.
labour. Yeah, I mean, Tate obviously, Tate was with them for a wee bit longer because he'd come in from, I think it was Partick he'd been at before, and had been kind of released and came into the Fife Elite setup and was there for, I think he was there for a year or so. But I mean, Bowie was literally... I was trying to search just as you were talking there, but the closest I can get is autumn 2018. He went to Fife Elite and he signed for the Rovers in January 2019. So autumn to January, he was with Fife Elite. So
Blair, I'll do that thing.
Very, very much a Glenotha Strollers project, I think.
I'll do that thing that's really rare on the internet, and I'll completely retract my praise for Fife Elite, and I'll bow to your superior knowledge, because not a lot. Fair play to the Strollers. Cheers for that one, lads. Moving on to the Rumour Mill. That's Ian. You touched on it earlier. It's currently grinding away like it's nothing else there. There's been a lot of speculation this week. Scott Burns was out in the Daily Record saying Aberdeen first team coach Peter Leven was on the shortlist for the job. The Sun were linking Darren O'Day, who's at Celtic. And then the Courier came out with Nacho Novo, and then is it? I've got under my notes after. But, it's just we've also got we've had a question coming on Twitter. I would also add that John Potter was out in the Courier earlier on this evening. He's basically came out flat out, said he's not going to be taking the job. He's going to be remaining as technical director. So the question came in from weepingsonambulist.jpg is the name, who basically said... Twitter, eh? What a place. It's the question was effectively, I wanted to ask all the presenters of the podcast, who out of the managerial shortlists has them saying the Stone Cold Steve Austin, hell yeah, or hell no. So what we'll do is we will start with you, Duncan. Who have you seen on the shortlists that has really jumped out as you as being someone that you would want to see at Rovers?
I was just trying to pull up the latest odds, but it looks like the market's gone again. But I think we're led to believe that the McBookie just sort of bring the market in at the end of the night to stop it getting rained on or something, and it'll be back up again in the morning. Which is a really weird kind of dynamic. So apologies if I kind of miss anyone obvious as I'm talking about this. So I think I don't know if I'm prepared to give him a Stone Cold Steve Austin hell yeah at this point, but I think
you've got to look for it, man.
Two cans of Budweiser and let's do this.
Yeah, it's not. I tell you this, it's not no stranger to the ring, Nacho Novo. So all things being equal, right now probably Tam Courts would be kind of top for me, and I don't know if that's just because I think I said last time he seems to be the one that ticks the most boxes in terms of like the likelihood, as opposed to necessarily being sort of the best for it. It's the one that would make the most sense. I do think when you do look at the odds and you look and see who's favourite and all this kind of stuff, it's that everybody who's listed is still fairly significantly odds against. So like Tam Courts, who I've just said I think is probably the best fit, is 4-1, or was 4-1 earlier this evening. That means nobody's got any idea. So there's no... The minute you check the odds and somebody's been backed into 1-2, 1-3, that's where we might find that, you know, there's been a decision somewhere. For now, it's just outright speculation. That Darno D article that you mentioned specifically says in it that he will not leave Celtic at this point. It's just filling column inches, really, at this point. So, sorry, to answer the question, Tam Courts is probably the kind of top of the list for me, and yes, bottom of the list, very much Nacho Novo.
Last seen trying to punt a fight against Kaz Milligan on Twitter.
I'd rather have Kaz Milligan, thank you.
Above her,
I'd rather have you in Scott. That was my
above
suggestion.
above or below John Hughes, though, Duncan. That's the question.
Oh, John Hughes has won a Scottish Cup, to be fair. I don't know how, but it's...
Don't, Robbie, don't.
I'm quite keen to see you try and burn down a concrete stand. So, I mean, I'm undecided on that.
Always.
Ian.
Pleasant chemistry teacher.
Ian, we'll come to you now. Is there anyone that you've seen that's particularly jumping out on the positive light, or who have you got that's going in hell no category?
Well, I think the banter appointment, as well as actually being a good appointment, would be Rhys McCabe.
Oh,
Who doesn't want that to happen? I mean, Rhys McCabe's obviously proven himself to be a good manager. Let's move on from that. It would be great fun. It would be really, really great fun. I was targeted, probably fairly, on Twitter after the game on Saturday, and I was sent the Rhys McCabe handing me a tissue photo quite often. It may or may not have made its way into my camera roll on my phone. Yeah, I'm gonna give a Stone Cold Steve Austin hell yeah to Rhys McCabe, and who's a hell no?
So many.
Christoph Berra. No. For no other reason other than I was going to say Nacho Novo and Duncan stole it.
I think that you've got the sheer outright nose of like, what are you doing? Why are you even anywhere near applying to this? And whereas I'm more like, actually, he's got a bit of grounding in terms of the coaching, but yeah, I can understand why maybe people are a bit sceptical. Blair, what are your thoughts on this question?
I'm with Ian. A big old 2 cans of Budweiser smashed together for Rhys McCabe. I would take him in a heartbeat. I can't stand the guy, but I'd take him in a heartbeat because it'd be hilarious. I think he would actually do a really good job. And actually, what one of my mates was like, oh no, we get him in and we get Megwa on loan. I was like, yes, get it done. Plus, he can play centre half, which puts Scott Brown one place further away from ever having to play there again, which is a bonus. I agree with Duncan as well. Tam Courts definitely would be a yes for me. I'm not convinced about this. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, do you want some of the other names that McBookie have listed? Do you want some of the bottom ends?
I'll get to the bottom end in a second. I'm still not convinced about Peter leaving. A wee bit unproven for my liking. Same with Darren O'Dea, although he seems to have quite a good reputation, Darren O'Dea. So he seems to be maybe the more plausible outside shout, effectively, for the unproven option. I said it on the show the other night, and I stand by it. Somebody unproven, I think, is really unfair, actually, based on where we're at just now. We need somebody with a bit of experience. The helm no for me, one that I heard the other day, was Ian McCall.
20-1. Ian McCall?
No. I'd rather rip my own arm off and beat myself to death with it.
He's at shorter odds.
Getting more extreme.
He's rated as more likely to get the job by the bookies than such luminaries as Barry Ferguson, Owen Coyle, Billy Dodds, Danny Lennon's down to 18-1. He's coming in.
That's because one person requested the odds get put on Twitter.
Yeah,
Bookie did it, and then they put a bet on.
Yeah, there's real trouble in the lower ranks there. But
imagine Ian McCall coming in. Oh,
the disappointment would be palpable.
No thanks.
Callum, your turn. Now, just to explain for you, Callum, Stone Cold Steve Austin was arrested in the early 2000s.
Stone Cold Steve Austin is. I've had my run into WWE before. If, obviously, the obvious hell yeses are Tam Courts, Rhys McCabe. They're like the two absolute go-to. As Blair mentioned, Peter leaving. If we were mid-table, I would take a punt on him. Because what he did, admittedly, it was a short interim sit at Aberdeen, but he got them playing really good football. They were a really good side.
I mean, technically, we're second bottom at the moment, Callum, so...
Good point, actually. Yes, we'll take Peter leaving. But if that's what we were aiming for, as a club, then yeah, I would take Peter leaving. But I want someone who would get us out of the division, and I would go with Tam Coates as my hell yeah. Hell no. Robbie, I'm going to go with your favourite. I'm going to go with Dougie Emery.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I need
careful now. Careful now. You'll set off the masses of Morton and delusions of grandeur. It was.
There is no grandeur in Greenock.
I don't know what the thoughts are behind that, but yeah, it's for me it's just a hard no. It's just a very unattractive way of playing football, as I said.
I would rather have Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Aye.
That's just born out of Dougie Emery does not want to be Morton manager anymore, because he was close to getting the Cali Thistle job as well, was he not? I can only assume that's where this, because he's towards the top of the list. I can only assume that's Dougie Emery basically pushing an agenda because he's fed up in Greenock, which, to be fair,
you would think that he's compos mentis, that just in general, the reaction to his what we've seen from our support is nah, and I don't think he's too keen on us. I suspect it's mere just speculation, but just in case there was any doubt, get the fuck. So yeah, for myself, yeah, I know that you guys have touched upon quite a lot about Rhys McCabe and Tam Courts. I think those are two obvious, as we say, standout candidates really potentially for going, but I think the real difficulty is, again, I know that a lot's been made of courts in Saudi Arabia and Rhys McCabe. We've got the obvious hurdle of trying to negotiate with Airdrie to sort of relinquish the sort of the man who's holding it all together for them there. Would be very, very funny if it did happen, though. Just the amount of rippings that would go into that Airdrie fan base would be something to behold, I think. Peter Leaving, I'm a lot more sold than the rest of you is. I would say that I think that he's got a really good track record in terms of what he's done with Aberdeen when he has been in interim charge. Obviously, I know that the sort of he's had different spells after when Barry Robson was in charge, when Warnock was in charge, Stephen Glass was in charge. Seemingly really good things have been said about him in terms of his man management. He keeps things nice and simple, plays players in the positions that they want to be in. And that generally speaking his philosophy is about sort of getting the attacking players, creating the chances. That sounds really positive to me, but also it sounds really, really wishful thinking because things aren't always as straightforward. And I think at Aberdeen, you've got a lot more resources at your dispense and a lot more there to work with compared to maybe Rovers. The guy's had a really interesting career. Had a sort of litany of serious knee injuries across his career, so it feels like almost destined to be within Raith Rovers Football Club. Went over to Belarus and Russia as well. Didn't he come back after the war started? So I don't know what that's all about. Would have thought that you would have been out of Russia quite sharpish. Blair's raising an eyebrow there. But aye, even still, Peter Leaving, I would be quite intrigued if he was appointed manager, and I think it would be a lot more positive than some of the ones that I would put on my hell no list. I think with the hell no, I'm going to take a bit of a different tack. A lot of people have looked down the sort of nostalgic route, and I might get lynched for saying this, but I know that some people have sort of mooted. Would we take Antonio Calderon back? We were having a chat about this in the group chat earlier on. For me, that would be a no. Completely different no to the likes of your Billy Dodds esque, like, absolutely no, this guy's a terrible manager, we just don't want him here. Antonio Calderon is a good manager, I just don't think that it would work in a post-Brexit world of where you're not getting lads. You're seeing an article on teletext, Callum, for your reference. Teletext was once a guide that you could use. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. But yeah, you're not looking on teletext and seeing that we signed an Argentinian centre half from Monaco, Christian Patino or someone like that, or a Senegalese goalkeeper. It's very much a case of, like, I think that the world's unfortunately changed for the worse in that respect, that these random signings don't just crop up. And it is a shame because it was a good laugh when it happened. But yeah, for me, I would not be going down that route. So yeah, that would be the Rumour Mill, and we'll move on now to take a look, because we do actually have a game on Saturday. It feels like it's very much in the background. I know, an hour in and we've not spoken about the game, but yeah, where do we start with this? So,
sorry, Partick, it's just not important.
John Potter was out on the pre-match interview, and there wasn't really any updates so much as I think the main focus was sort of on the continuity factor. So, Blair, I mean, again, no news in terms of the players. So, do you think it makes this very hard for a preview podcast from our perspective?
We know nothing. Nothing. Not a clue. We've no idea who's fit, who's not fit. Picking a team. Not a chance. Yeah, basically. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to lay this out here right now. I'm really looking forward to this. I always like the first home game of the season. It's always got a nice kind of, and we're back, like Saturdays are back kind of feeling. Away games are never quite the same kind of feeling. So, yeah, really looking forward to it. Hopeful of a bit of a response to last week and what's gone on, and a good performance from whoever is lucky enough to pull on that blue shirt. But yeah, obviously nothing to add. I'm not a clue.
This is not related to how little we've got to go on, but I really need to go, so I'm going to drop off.
Enjoy
the rest of your podcast.
Comes on for a preview podcast against Partick Thistle. Speaks absolutely nothing about Partick Thistle. That's the only podcast for you folks. Callum, Duncan mentioned earlier on, to sort of segue back to one of the points that he made. So obviously, intrinsically, when you look at the way that the sacking of Ian Murray's gone, it had been sort of laid out about how the football that we've been playing wasn't really to the sort of board's fancy, that we weren't creating enough in terms of the sort of the way that we were going about our business. Do you think there'll be a bit of a response from the players to sort of step up? What would be your thoughts about that?
I hope so. To put it bluntly, I'd hope so, because that Edgewood game, we just did not create anything whatsoever. So, hopefully it's like our creative players, so you've got Stanton, Easton, Connolly, Mullen, Vaughan, all them not, it's like they can create chances easily. So hopefully they step up and do their job, basically. I think that the real question is going to be defensively, though, just due to the fact that we've not seen Hanlon since the pre-season friendlies. Fordyce went off. Murray got cramp. So it looks like we're going into the second game of the season with Liam Dick and Scott Brown as our centre backs. I mean, I love this club.
I mean, I would be a bit concerned if cramps lasting a full week. That's the only thing I would say. Just going in.
Have you considered that this is a Raith Rovers centre back we're talking about?
But come on, it's. I think there's.
I'm not, by the way, not sure it was cramp. To be fair, I think it was like a kind of a thigh strain, a hamstring strain. I wouldn't be surprised if he did have an issue.
I'm not convinced.
Saved you a slaughtering in the stand there, Callum. If I saw you, and he's not in the lineup. I think the other main dilemma is going forward, because I know that we'd sort of spoken about it before. Jack Hamilton obviously came off. Louis Vaughan's not played a lot of football so far this season, really just the sort of time that he had on the pitch against Airdrie. And then with Callum Smith as well. So, Duncan, do you think it's a dilemma there as to what we're actually going to be doing looking forward in terms of Saturday?
Yes, I definitely do. As you say, like Hamilton was on and off again. Kind of immediately, you have to assume that's a fairly serious injury, as in one that will keep him out for longer than a week. Like you and Murray, Callum Smith was kind of walking wounded by the looks of it. At the end of the game, he did not look like he was moving particularly freely. And that's where you do kind of run into a dilemma, because if you don't have Jack Hamilton, you don't have Callum Smith, you can certainly then go to Lewis Vaughan, absolutely will play up front. But I mean, is he getting 90 minutes on him? Can you risk him? Not risk him, but conditioning wise, he didn't get a pre-season. That's a huge ask
sensible
to go and try and squeeze 90 minutes out of him. And so taking as read then that you'll have to make a substitution at some point. Who's next? We don't have a fourth forward. We don't have a fourth striker. You're then having to basically bring someone out of your kind of attacking midfield stable. And Stanton plays up front, Easton plays up front.
I think it would be Stanton.
Where does Jake Nicholson play? He's a forward. Is he a winger? Or can he play up front?
I've seen him play once on the wing, I think last pre-season against Linlithgow Rose. I don't think he's a striker. I
think if we were going for speculation, I think the likelihood is that Potter and Cameron would probably go. I'm so close to saying Murray there. Potter and Cameron would be likely to go with. I think it would either be one of Stanton. I think would be probably the least obvious choice in a roundabout way. Other than that, maybe Josh Mullen. Could he potentially?
I would have thought Gibson or Montague just to run about.
Yeah,
maybe that's kind of the way that I've ended up. Kind of when I was kind of trying to work that through, is Montague ends up playing as the 10, and Stanton ends up playing as that's basically a false 9, effectively, because he can't be an actual 9 unless he's taking a lot of time this week to learn some new stuff. But it's going to be interesting as much as anything else, just to see how the team does perform. I mean, I'm not writing off Saturday by any means at all. But I think without a managerial change, it would be a big ask when you look at the injuries that we've got.
Yeah.
But what I am keen to see is to what extent the team does look different. Because I don't know, watching Murray's team on Saturday there against Airdrie in the previous games, it didn't feel obvious as to why they weren't creating chances. It doesn't feel like it's a really on-the-nose thing where like he's insisting that they always try and play it out from the back and they can't get it out the back line or anything. It doesn't seem as obvious as that. And it would seem, on that basis, it would seem almost unrealistic to expect that suddenly they're going to play with a whole load of abandon and be creating dozens of chances again. But I mean, but maybe they will. Maybe, but I don't know. So that's what I'm keen to see. But yeah, even under normal circumstance, I would be kind of cautious in terms of this. I mean, I would hope Callum Smith's fit enough to make it through and try and kind of battle on as he always does, as he did on Saturday. Up front, hopefully the same of you and Murray, and then at least you've got an 11 that's can start the game with people playing more or less where they should be. But the team that finishes the game is going to have to be cobbled together at that rate anyway. So it's a big ask.
I would add as well that there is a factor of potentially returning players that we've not seen. I mean, sort of Scott Brown the indication for me and Murray last week before the game was that he would be sort of going into this one, he would be looking to be back for that. And then as well, Paul Hanlon seemed to be gradually progressing with his fitness. He had a sort of setback, and then as
Murray said Hanlon was closer than Brown.
Yeah, so it might be that we see Paul Hanlon, and I think that would be a huge boost, because I think Paul Hanlon's he's a victim of circumstance, and that because we've had so many injury problems before, that people are automatically saying, how come we've not seen him yet? What's happened here? Why is there... And even this narrative that's cropped up on fans outside of the club is that, well, we signed Dad's Army. You've signed lads like Stevenson and Hanlon and wasted money on them. Stevenson's, for me, he's been excellent so far. Yeah. I'd be surprised if you find Rovers fans that say any differently. And Hanlon, I think, has just been unfortunate. So yeah,
the good thing with Hanlon is he's kind of in the opposite position to Lewis Vaughan in that he did get at least the first half of pre-season. He's not coming in from a standing start. You know, he sort of got up to speed, played the friendlies, and then unfortunately he's picked something up. But it should mean that he's able to get back into the swing of things relatively quick.
Yeah. From the Partick perspective, they had a 0-0 draw against Greenock Morton last weekend. So I think that they'll be keen to sort of exercise that. And again, I know that before the season, the focus has been on ourselves, and Partick has been sort of like the two big hitters going into the league. Callum, what are you expecting in terms of that? Do you think there will be a response on that front after that sort of disappointment against Morton, or how are you feeling?
Oh, they'll definitely have a response. They don't particularly get on with Morton. I don't think anyone gets on with Morton, actually. So, but Partick Thistle do seem to, their fans and some of the players, Brian Graham, they seem to really not like Morton. So them getting a 0-0 draw will really annoy them. They'll look to massively improve on that as well. Also, the idea that the two of us are going to be the two big hitters in the league, along with Livingston. I mean, I said it in my own video where it's like, yeah, I see us two being the two strongest teams in the league, and that'll be the title fight between us two. That's going to add to this. They're going to go all out. And unfortunately, I said in the prediction thing that Blair's put up, I actually put a Partick Thistle win. I can see Partick Thistle winning this game, just out of the fact the squads are evenly.
Just remember just remember the treatment Craig Cairns got for coming on this podcast and not saying that the Rovers would win a game.
Can I just stop you there for a second, though, because it's already been mentioned in this show and it was said out loud and everybody just glossed over it. But one of us got 3 points last week.
Yeah.
And one of us got 3 points last week and didn't get the both teams to score correct in the Raith Rovers game, but did get the result correct, Robbie.
Yeah. I went. I did say in my prediction before on the podcast, I've said that my heart felt for a Rovers win, but my head was going with the 1-0.
Cold-blooded predicting.
Aye, the Aaron Reid goal in the 90th minute just to wind us up. So I went with that one just out of safety.
I mean, I will say, but the hot off the presses, we've had 70 entrants already into this week's predictor.
That's excellent.
24% have an away win.
That's abysmal. That's just
It's awful.
for shame.
It's
28%, nearly 29% have a draw, and a little over 47% remaining with the home win.
Good.
Guys, you just have to convince yourself something's there that's not. It's like Dunfermline and Falkirk being a derby. It's like, come on, it's not a derby.
This is why I'll never win the prediction league, because I'll never predict the Rovers to lose. I just won't do it.
I can't remember how I answered it, so I could be talking completely out of
I
turn.
put a draw.
Just to actually come back to this for a second, I think I'd kind of convinced myself that Partick Thistle were better than they are. For some reason, without actually really paying attention to their summer business, I'd kind of fallen into this trap of thinking it had been really impressive. I think Kyle Turner was a big part of that, to be fair. I think that was a big Kyle Turner, that's a great sign, he'll be really good. But I was looking at the team that they put out against Morton, and I mean, it's not packed to the gills with superstars, put it that way. So they get Miles Roberts in goal, new guy, never seen him before, don't know, could be good, could be bad. Kept a clean sheet, he's probably not dreadful. Waziri Williams played right back, he's not a right back, so there's a weakness straight away.
We also don't have a right back.
It's
not important.
Freeman.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Freeman can come back in. That's the thing. I know it says.
Yeah, centre half.
I fully hope it does.
Dan O'Reilly and Luke Macbeth. Dan O'Reilly's decent. Luke Macbeth's a midfielder who has played well at centre half. But again, you're not talking about superstars there. Lee Ashcroft was on the bench. I don't know whether that's an injury issue or if he's already fallen out of favour. Harry Milne at left back's a good left back, but he's not as good as he was a couple of years ago. Kyle Turner and Robbie Crawford, solid championship midfield, but not any better than that. Scott Robinson, Aidan Fitzpatrick, Logan Chalmers and Brian Graham. That's a decent front four. But again, not world beaters. Like, it's a decent front four, don't get me wrong, right? I'm not.
The Brian Graham thing as well, like, that's going to run out eventually. I mean, what is he now, 37, 38? And I know that this is like prime, it's going to come back to bite me, get your bookmarks ready. I've always been a big Brian Graham fan, as much as he's a greeting-faced, torn-faced shitbag. He's a goal scorer, and he always has been a goal scorer. But that I mean, it literally by just nature, it will not last forever. I mean, it's going to run out eventually. So
it's going to run out.
Why not this
season? Trigger that manager release clause.
Why not this season?
Gone out of it.
And that's
it.
Only got one other striker. It's that Rico Diak, and referees won't even let him on the park, so he can't be that good. But that's, I mean, like, their bench, there's very little on their bench, just to round that off, sorry. So they got a sub-goalkeeper, Lee Ashcroft, Ben Stanway, Xander McKenzie, Stuart Bannigan, James Lyon and Rico Diak. So there's not a lot of depth there either. Which is not to say that I don't think Thistle are any use or any of that at all. I think I've been quite...
they're not going to turn up and roll over us, hopefully. That's the...
But they're not easy. I think, personally, I'd convinced myself that Thistle were in a better place than they are. I mean, even they brought in...
Austin as well.
They brought in Dan Mackay, who scored the winner for Livingston against us in the Scottish Cup last season. He's going to miss the next 4 months with an injury. So, I mean, that's really unfortunate, obviously terrible for him. But if it's not that Thistle are getting all their own way, they didn't sack their manager last week, but they are not firing on all cylinders by any means at all.
To a degree as well, you've got to remember that realistically, everyone looking at this game is going to be thinking Partick Thistle win. Like, from the outside, you're not going to get anyone that's going to be Raith Rovers. You know what? They've sacked their manager. They're going for an injury crisis, and football can work that way, where it's results can come up funny.
A goalless draw with Morton at home on the opening day of the season is one of those results that either ages really well or it ages really badly.
Yeah,
and there's probably not there's no world where that's a mere result, because Morton are either going to defy the odds and be brilliant, or they're going to be Morton. So Do you know, it's one of the two. So it's a bit like, because I did say that last season, like that draw that we got on the first day at Partick Thistle, you're like, that result's only going to get better with time. That coming back to 2-2, in 4 months' time, you're going to be looking back at that and going, by the way, there's not many teams have gone to Firhill this year and got away with a point. That's a good result. I'm not sure that many teams are going to be saying, Morton have come to town and we've got a point. That's a good result. Maybe.
Well, we'll soon find out with Rovers and Thistle come Saturday. I think that it's really much to what Andrew Barrowman said in his interview, regardless of whether you liked it or you were against it. I think the key message for Rovers fans, relight the fire to get everyone back on board, make sure that we're sticking together as a siege mentality. And nobody's, as I said before, I don't think anyone's really looking at this the game and for a Rovers perspective, from the outside of a Rovers perspective, and sort of feeling their chances. So, yeah, fingers crossed that we can get a big result, kickstart our season and kick on. And again, if things don't go to the plan, I think that you've got all the factors there to sort of say, look, there's plenty to build on. New manager coming in soon, and to see who that'll be. So fingers crossed, we've got every reason for optimism. No, Blair?
If we didn't win on Saturday, I'm rioting. Burn it down.
Blair, I wouldn't expect anything less. I feel like you're taking the war cry of relight the fire to be a bit too literally for my liking.
Aye,
and probably Andrew Barrowman's liking as well. So
he brought fire into this.
We will no doubt be back at the end of the weekend, probably on Sunday, with a review of the Thistle game, maybe talking a wee bit more about football this time, and probably some speculation as well, no doubt. But thank you again for taking the time to listen. As ever, you know where to find us on Twitter, YouTube, Etsy shop, etc, etc. Please make sure to subscribe. As Blair's already touched on, we do have the Prediction League there. I'll put a link for that in the Google Forms and that in the show notes. But yeah, hope that you enjoy the game. Thanks for taking the time for listening, and bye for now.